Jennifer Moss for inviting me to this. I took some books up to the Cultural Center probably 2 years ago, first time I met Jennifer. And gosh, she made me feel like she'd known me all my life, and it was so nice, and I can understand why that Cultural Center now is doing as good as it is with folks like her that are there greeting people and making them feel so much at home. And if any of you have not been there, it's worth your time to go to the Cultural Center, because it's a wonderful, wonderful place, and got so many artifacts and so impressive. Tell you a little bit about myself, because I don't believe a lot of you know me. Jerry Vickery. I was born and raised in the Keowee community. Went to school there, and in fact, this is the 30th of May. 50 years ago, on the 28th of May, I was one of 21 students, girls and boys, who graduated from Keowee High School. That was the last graduating class of Keowee High School. So this is sort of a special day, and the 50th anniversary for me. We also had our little 50th anniversary back in April. We have a school reunion. We don't have a class reunion, because if we had a class reunion, there'd be fewer people here than what's here today. So we have to have a school reunion. Anybody that's ever been affiliated with Keowee always comes, and we had a big crowd there. And one of the ladies, or several ladies that are responsible for it here today, Shirley and Betty and your friends, and I appreciate what y'all did, because we had a large crowd there, and everybody really, really enjoyed it. And Shirley and I go back a long, long way. And this is sort of what Keowee is all about. This is what I'm going to talk to you about. Once you've been a part of Keowee, your family. It's so tight, it was so small, and yet so tight-knit. And Shirley and I went to school there together, and certainly grew up together and dated for a while. And of course, I got kind of shot out the saddle, and Shirley went on to her way. But anyway, that's the kind of things that happen. But it was a wonderful, wonderful place. And I really want to, and of course, not only did I graduate from Keowee High School, I was fortunate enough to go on. I have a degree from what's now Southern Wesleyan University. Also have a journalism degree from the United States Defense Information School. And that's where I really got my interest in journalism. And I started out to work with Paul League at the Seneca Journal, who probably did more to document the history of Lake Keowee and Lake Jocassee of anybody in the world. If anybody wants to really go back to when this thing first started, you go back to the archives of the Seneca Journal. Paul gave me an opportunity to start there. Later I had an opportunity to go to Easley, Progress in Easley, and was fortunate enough to do well and was able to buy that newspaper and owned it for over 30 years. We sold it in 2003 and retired. We still live in Easley, but our roots are here in Oconee County and certainly Keowee, the Keowee community. I want to play you something that sort of is reminiscent. I think you'll all recognize it, but it'll make you sort of think, and it's really what Keowee is all about. So let me go back here and see if I can get to this computer and work it. I'm not too computer savvy, but let's see what we can do here. Well, it's telling me I don't have my internet, which is fine. I don't need that. And listen closely to this if you would. I really think you're all going to recognize it.
Each evening from December to December, before you drift to sleep upon your cot, think back on all the tales that you remember of Camelot. Ask every person if he's heard the story, and tell it strong and clear if he has not.
think all of you remember that movie. I've got 13 years of high school annuals sitting back here. This is my Camelot. That's what Keowee was. The difference between Keowee and Camelot is Keowee was a real place. Not fictional, not mystic, but a real place with real people. The finest people that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's ever walked the face of this earth. Had so much influence on my life and so much influence on so many other lives. It's just no way that you know, you can really understand that unless you lived it. And as you get back to these reunions and see the folks that had so much impact on your life and see how good they're doing, it just makes you feel good that you were in that type of environment. Upperclassmen were not smart alecks to us lowerclassmen. They were our role models, and they did a good example for us to follow. I remember I had a bus driver by the name of Zeke McCurry. Zeke went on later and he's got a welding shop and did real well for himself. But when I was a kid, he was my idol. I said, when I get that age, I'm going to drive a bus. I'm going to be like Zeke. Folks, I drove a bus for 2 years. I was 16 years old, 79 kids. It scares me to death that I had that kind of responsibility. 16-year-old shouldn't have that kind of responsibility. But we all did. And we took care of it. Never a problem, never a wreck, never an incident. But oh, it scares me to death now to think that I had that type of those children in my grasp and had to, oh, it's just, it'll scare you. Had a basketball player by the name of Vernon Punk Smith. I know you folks don't know him, but if we had had any type of school that had any kind of publicity, we had several basketball players that came along that would have been scholarship material. But we never got any publicity. We were up there in the woods. Never got publicity. But Vernon was my idol. I wanted to be a Vernon Smith and play basketball for Keowee. That kept me interested in my studies enough to keep my grade ratio up. They didn't play around with us. We had a grade ratio we had to meet or we didn't play. It was just that simple. So I was able to get my grades where they needed to be and keep them up for the 4 years that I played basketball. In the last 2 years, I was a starter on the team, just like Vernon. They were role models. They made us better than we would have been otherwise. A young couple, they're not here today, but by the name of Geraldine Averson and Neil Ford fell in love in their senior year. They were 2 or 3 years ahead of us. But you could just see the love in each of their eyes when they were together. It makes you want to have that kind of relationship with somebody. One time I thought it might be Shirley, but it didn't turn out to be that. But still, at the same time, it made you want to have that type of relationship. Folks, I've been married for 48 years now to the same wonderful, lovely lady. And love her more today, I guess, than I ever have. Here again, that childhood, you think about being a child and falling in love. Gosh, you don't know what it's all about. How did you make it this far? You know, the good Lord did something. But we had role models in which we were able to follow and look on and want to be like them. Such a wonderful, innocent life. I learned to say the Lord's Prayer in Keowee Grammar School and the Pledge of Allegiance. I went to church. I went to New Hope Church. But I learned the Lord's Prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance at my school. We were patriotic. We knew the meaning of allegiance. They taught God and country. Of course, they taught all these other things too that I never thought I would need until I got to college, and I found out just how much they did teach us. They were great. We were small, but we did not have any deficiencies. We had great instructors. In fact, Miss Cashin, who is, I think, Debbie's distant relative, was one of our, Arthur Brown's daughter here in Walhalla, was one of our great teachers.
Rose Cashin.
Rose Cashin, tremendous,
I knew her.
tremendous, loved her to death, but tough. Let me tell you,
I believe it.
I appreciated that tough when I got in college. I appreciated that tough. It came in handy. This was the type of school we had at Keowee. And this was the whole, at one time, let me set the boundaries of what I call Keowee. To the west would be what's called the Powell's Country Junction, a couple of miles above there. To the south would have been Cane Creek. To the north would have been Keowee River. To the east would have been Dorsey's Store, coming right out of Seneca. 3 of those landmarks are now underwater. But that would have been the boundaries that made up the Keowee family. I could tell you folks, every person that lived in those houses at one time, first name, their kids, everything. I mean, that's how close-knit we were. And in fact, at Dorsey's Store, coming out of Seneca, there was a road there, intersection, and one of the roads turned down, and it's what's now left of it is the Ebenezer Road, or Fairview Road, I'm not sure what they call it. But 3 of the prettiest girls that I ever known in high school lived on that road. Shirley was one, Sandra Wall was another, and Joyce Conway was the other. Well, I had a great, good-looking 55 Chevrolet Junker. So I'd run it over there and run them down that road. Figured I'd see one of them out in the yard doing something just to stop and say hello, you know, and say, hey, would you like to run to the store and get a dope? That's what we call them, dopes. There were a couple of colors back that as dopes. Yep. I never did see one of them out of the house. I bet I spent probably 100 gallons worth of 18 cent gallon gas going up and down that road trying to find those girls. Never did. When the gas went from 18 cents to 20 cents, I had to stop it. It got out of my budget. But I can remember going to the station and filling up for 18 cents. We got a gas war. Man, get on down there to 16, 17 cents sometime. Just amazing. The book that I wrote, and get on to it now, it chronologically the life of a young man that I was in school with, and these other folks were too, the Hester family. It was a large family. Of course, most sharecropper families were large. That's what made them valuable for the landowners. The larger the family and the more boys they had, the more valuable the family was to the landowner. I was very fortunate in the way this came about. Johnny Hester also lives in Easley, retired, of course. And he and I met up at a little small diner there in Easley. I used to go into work real early and go by the diner and get breakfast and go into work. Well, I kept seeing this older guy over there. And finally one day, somebody said something about me and that on the newspapers. He came over to me and said, are you that Vickery from Keowee that owns that newspaper? And I said, yeah, I sure am, John. So we got to talking, and the more he talked, the more I listened. He had a story. I said, Johnny, we need to sit down and write this story. I can't write. I can't. Well, he could. He really could. He had to stay out of school and chop cotton too many days to learn how to read and write. So anyway, I said, you just talk, and I'll write. We did that for almost 2 years. We'd take 2 days a week, 2 mornings a week, for about 2 or 3 hours. The guy had a photographic memory. I've never seen anything like it in my life. He could remember everything that went on in his life. And the major events that I could verify, I would verify just to make sure we were on track. I never found a discrepancy. Never found a discrepancy. Everything he told me, there was a very tragic accident that took place in the book about a cotton truck that one of his cousins was on it and pulled out in front of a train out here in Seneca. Killed all 3 of the people in the truck and scattered cotton up and down. He told me all about that. Well, I was able to go back to the archives. Sure enough, every detail he told me about it was in the paper. He hadn't seen a write-up on it. He couldn't have read it if he had seen it. But he's very intelligent now, don't get me wrong. Just because he couldn't read and write. I had a father that had a 9th grade education, one of the smartest human beings I've ever known in my life. Just because he didn't have a diploma or a degree didn't mean he wasn't smart. He was smart. But it was amazing how he could remember the things that happened. And the more he talked, the more interest I got. And that's where we sat down and was able to start putting together the book. And we've had very good luck with it. We're in our second printing now. And let me go back and just read you a few excerpts for some of you that hadn't read the book and kind of give you an idea. Like I said, I don't have a description. Basically, there's been a lot of books written about Keowee. An awful lot of books, because Keowee is sort of a magic name. You put Keowee to it and it'll say it for some reason. Everybody wants to know about Keowee. Well, Dot Robertson wrote one of the better books on Keowee, where she went through and documented a lot of the archaeological finds and things there, and the rich Indian culture. That has been documented in several books, because Keowee was very rich in Indian culture. But nobody has ever attempted to write about the common person that lived in it. Like me, I was common. My dad was a plumber, electrician. But I wasn't quite as low on that common level as Johnny was, being a sharecropper, because that was the lowest level in the social, in our social society, was the sharecropper. But not that any of us made fun of him at school, because most of us were in about the same shape that he was. The only difference was our daddy had a job bringing in a little income, where his dad had to depend on the crop. So there wasn't anybody making fun of anybody at that time, were there, Shirley? We were all in about the same place, same shape. That's the reason there was that close-knit bond that was there. Let me get my book that I had marked. I'm sorry. I had a lot of fun. One time I did a presentation over at Keowee on the book. It was a hit in Keowee big time, because the last half of the book basically takes place in what is now Keowee. And this lady asked me, she says, "Now, Mr. Vickery, where's all these cornfields and all these cotton fields you're talking about in that book? Where they at? Where they at?" I said, "Ma'am, your house is right in the middle of one." "Oh, no, look at them pine trees out there. No way this could ever been a field." Well, it don't take but about 30 or 40 years for a pine tree to get pretty good size. She just couldn't believe it. I said, "All right, let's walk out your back door here." I said, "You see that what I called a terrace," but she didn't call it by that name. It was just a mound that went around the edge of her yard and went into the distance and out into the neighbor's yard and just kept going. I said, "Do you know what this is?" "Oh, I figured the landscapers must have fixed this for us before they built a house." I said, "Ma'am, this was a terrace. Where your house at used to have cotton in it." She just could not believe it, because of all the pine trees that are in there now. But that was one of the more funnier things that I run into. She lived in the middle of a cotton field, and I'm not sure she really wanted to admit it. To be honest with you, because, you know, Keowee Keys, parts of it are pretty exclusive place. But that was one of the funnier things that we ran into. This book that I've written here, along with Johnny's help, it's a true and factual account of possibly the last family to ever sharecrop that fertile valley, the land encompassed within the Keowee River Valley and some of its lower tributaries, such as the Little River and the Crooked Creek. They're known as the Clayton H. Hester family, and their forgotten stories brought to life by the words of Clayton's son, Johnny Hester. I didn't spend a whole lot of time when I was growing up in Joe Cassie. I knew Joe Cassie was there, I knew the Girl Scout was there, but we had our own recreation in Keowee. We had High Falls. High Falls was on the Little River. That was probably one of the most scenic and most visited places in the upstate, because it was so close to Clemson University. Clemson used that, the students down there, as their retreats and getaway. It was like a large beach. The way the water come over the falls and around it made a tremendous sandbar. And you go over there anytime on the weekends when school was at Clemson. Of course, you got to remember, at that time, Clemson had co-eds, but it was mostly still cadets, mostly still men. So wasn't a whole lot of interesting things to see over there. But there were a lot of people, a lot of boys. So that never did But we spent a lot of time over there when college kids wasn't there, because it was a great swimming area. That was our recreation, High Falls. So we didn't need to go up to Jocassee Valley and have any kind of an outing there. So the Hester family had been sharecroppers for generations in and around Oconee County. They never owned a foot of ground, but toiled endlessly, hundreds of acres from the first part of the century until their final exit in the early 1960s, prior to the river's demise. Our story begins with the birth of Johnny Hester on September 1st of 1939 and follows his family's tremendous hardships as they struggle to survive farming lands owned by second and third descendants of the landowners mentioned in the book Keowee. Now, the book Keowee, also done by Dot Jackson, talks about the stalwart families that owned all the land. The Craigs, Whitmires, the Fergusons, all these families had been in there forever, and they owned all the land in the Keowee River Valley. And that book pretty well describes them. And I know we were talking a while ago about, we brought up how did Duke Power buy the property and all. Duke started out disguising themselves as Crescent Land and Timber Company. Keowee sold before Jocassee because they were the way they were building, they were buying up everything in Keowee, knowing if they got a majority of the land, they'd go to eminent domain then and get what they wanted. They came in telling people that this is Crescent Land and Timber, and we want to buy your property. Well, that, you know, what they're going to do, buy this old washed away land and put pine trees on it, that was the idea. That was what everybody thought. Wasn't no mention of Duke Power. And none of us knew Duke Power owned Crescent Land and Timber. They got most of that land for less than a third of what it was actually worth. By the time the news got out that what it really was, they already had 75% or more, 80% of the land they needed for Keowee. The last people to sell got well. They bought 180 acres from my dad. He didn't get well. But, you know, he said it was fair, and I guess it was. Because, you know, you look out now and you see the pristine beauty. Oh, man, it's beautiful. Oh, man, they just covered up such beautiful places. They did in some places. The bottomland was pretty in Keowee. Now, I'm not talking about Jocassee. Nothing else in Keowee was pretty. It was already washed away, gullies 50 feet deep. We ruined that land. We ruined that land by over-farming, not using good conservation practices. We ruined all the hillsides. There wasn't nothing pretty in Keowee once you got out of the bottomland. Nothing. It was all just gullies and red clay. It looks a lot better now than it did then. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm excited about what they did, because they destroyed a way of life that'll never come back there. But they did do some good things. When I graduated from high school, I had two choices. If I wanted to go straight to work, I could go to the mill and get a job that night. That was it. Otherwise, I had to go off to college somewhere. And then, if I finished college, I couldn't come back to Keowee. I had to go somewhere where a college degree was necessary. You didn't have to have a college degree just to be a work-in in the mill, because I worked there 4 years, third shift, while I was in college, so I know. You leave at one shift today, that's back when Texas were going so strong, you could actually quit one job on the first shift and be at another job on the third shift. That was how bad people needed help back then. But that was our only opportunity, was textiles. That was it. They ran everything. Now, Duke changed all that. A young man can go to Seneca High School, Walhalla High, graduate, go to Clemson, come right back to his home if he wants to, and find a wonderful career right here, staying right here in his hometown. I couldn't do that. That's the reason I had to go to Eastley. Seneca Journal certainly wasn't ever going to be for sale, not during my young time. So I was forced out. And a lot of our kids were forced out. Some of them that I graduated with, and Shirley knows a lot of them, went to work for Duke Power. Now they got to stay here. But anybody who went on to college and wanted to try to get into any kind of ownership of a business or management or something, they had to leave the area. There just was no opportunity here whatsoever. And Duke changed all of that, which is one of the bright spots that did come out of that. There's an area here, if you really want to know what the geography was. This is in the Keowee Valley, in the low-lying areas. And I've already told you what the hillsides look like. But anyway, the acreage that we cultivated on the Craig farm lay directly a mile down from what 100 years earlier was the center of the Cherokee Nation in the upstate Keowee town. Now, I think probably any of you's got any history knowledge knows Keowee town and where that was located at, right above the dam on the Keowee River. Located on our farm was several small villages that sprang from the main town. According to some history buffs, small Indian villages were located all up and down the river from the main settlement. This went all the way down to Clemson, because, see, the Keowee and the Little River came together a few miles below what's Erie. It was a very thriving mill town at that time, and it made up the Seneca River. Of course, the 12-mile coming in from up in 6 Mile Pickens, they all went together and made up what's the Seneca River. And of course, there was a band of Seneca Indians. All these were Cherokees, though. It was all part of the Cherokee family. So there were Indian villages dotted all up and down that area. One particular place that I spent a lot of time in, and you got to see, this is Johnny talking. One particular place that I spent a lot of time in was a place called the Indian Hollow. This place was located up the river at the end of the bottomland. There was a high bluff extending from the upland almost all the way to the river's edge. On top of the bluff were grave sites marked with old field stones. We really never knew whether they were graves of Indians or the slaves. And they did have some slaves at that, early on, and the large families up there did. They were located high on the bluff so the river would not flood them. Descending down into the deep hollow, a spring head was located at the far end, away from the river, creating a nice flowing stream through the middle of the wide 400-plus foot hollow. On the end, next to the river, an earthen footbridge crossed the stream, approximately 3 feet wide, 10 feet long. The hollow was full of huge trees with dugout places along the slopes all around the hollow. You could tell that someone had once inhabited these places. Those were Indian dugouts where they would spend time and get out of the weather. Walking around in the hollow was like being on sacred ground. I was only 13 years old, but I had a spiritual awakening in this place, similar to what I had seen in church as a Christian salvation. Once I was hunting and went to the hollow because it flourished with small game, including squirrels, which I was after. Reaching the center of the hollow, I decided to sit down and rest a few minutes from the long walk from home. Being tired would affect my aim, and I took pride in my shooting ability. It was a beautiful fall day. For some strange reason, I was aware of all the wonderful nature that surrounded me, things that before that I had just taken for granted. The air was cool, the sky was blue, and the leaves had turned into their brilliant fall coat. I sat there with my rifle across my legs and just took in all the beauty that surrounded me. It was so peaceful. I felt a sensation of calm that I had never experienced nor have ever experienced since. I really felt that I was in a sacred place. I could have killed a dozen squirrels, but I did not even pick up my rifle. I just felt that it was a part of this ancient, I just felt that I was a part of this ancient landscape. I sat there and did what today is called meditating. From that day forward, I developed a love for this valley and the natural beauty it possessed, and have never let go of this wonderful place. The memory of this place still burns in my heart with passion. And of course, Johnny has said that he will return to this river, but this time it will be for eternity. In other words, he's going to have his ashes scattered in the river when he passes. The reason that we know that it was so culturally rich in Indian tribes and towns and things there, whenever you would plow, everything was plowed at that time, of course, with mules, not tractors, so you were close to the ground. You unearthed, every time you unearthed all this broken pottery, beads, He even unearthed half of a Tommy Hawk at one time. I mean, it was just nothing. To be honest with you, we didn't think enough of it to even pick it up half the time, because it was so everywhere. It was just everywhere. Well, that's a shame, because we could have had some valuable collections, but it was just part of our world. When it would rain, have a pretty hard rain, washing rain, and you've seen in the summer how the sun comes right back out right after a heavy shower. You'd look out through there and it was like 1,000 lights. It was beads that were reflecting from the sun, where the rain had washed the mud off of the beads. We didn't pick them up. They were just there. And I noticed when the lake went down back in the drought a couple of years ago, Corps of Engineers went around, a lot of that stuff was beginning to surface again. The lake went down so far, and as the water receded, it pulled a lot of the sand and silt off of the artifacts. Well, the Corps went around with signs, and you can't pick up artifacts. You're not supposed to ever pick up an artifact when the water's down on any of these lakes. That's illegal according to the Corps. They did allow Oconee to dig out, and you might can tell me more about this. Y'all got some dugouts out of the river bank. The water
Got
drops
the
below.
one Keowee canoe. It was found in the Keowee River.
Yeah. So that was interesting, and they did allow them to go ahead to take it out to preserve it, which I'm certainly glad of that. But folks, this was a land that is just so indescribable. But what really made it so great and so wonderful were the people. And there's just no way to, now we've got good people, I'm not saying that at all, but this was such a time when we were young, we were just full of energy and just, you know, we just all came together as one big major family. And that wasn't hard to do in a school where you knew everybody, not just in my 21 classmates. I knew everybody all the way back to probably the 5th grade, and then the ones on beyond that, I knew families. I knew where they came from. And on my bus. And I wasn't the only bus driver there, but you know, you just build such relationships with these people. And that's what's really gone now, because of the fact that it's so diversified now. So diversified. Got about 5 minutes. You guys got anything that you'd like to ask maybe that I hadn't covered? Yes, ma'am.
Just a comment. We moved here about 10 years ago, and this was the first book that we read on the area. Thanks to some friends of ours who said, you got to read this. I have to say it was one of the most moving books I've ever read about life for a family like this, making it literally moment by moment. Such a tough life, and no guarantees of anything except more hard luck.
People would say, well, why didn't they can stuff? Why didn't they do this? Folks, they got married, if you remember in the book. The kid was just 14 years old. Her mother had died. Her mother had not had time to teach her how to keep house, how to can. They started out not knowing anything except how to have kids. And that's the reason. They were just so totally ignorant of how to maintain any kind of nutrition. That's the reason 2 of their boys had to go to Oconee Hospital because of malnutrition. But they didn't take those boys away from that family, saying you're not that was common. They tried to get somebody in there to teach them how to do nutrition. But
one of your, I think one of the stories in your book in particular, maybe I'm wrong because we've done a lot of reading on the area, but one of the children has a toothache, and the father has to take him to the dentist who's in town, downtown Seneca, we all know. It took the whole day, and it cost him 50 cents. And it was, I mean, how were they going to pay for this? Heartbreaking, heartbreaking. And I have a question. Where was Keowee High School?
Keowee High School is, of course, on the Keowee School Road, up above the New Hope Baptist Church, about 1.5 miles. There's not they tore down the picture that I've got here in the book of it, but it's on the same side as Keowee Elementary School is. And that holds the record of being, Keowee is the oldest school in Oconee County to stay on one site for over 100 years. That's where it started, and that's where it is still today. All the other schools have moved somewhat, but Keowee is still in the same exact place today, even though it's just a grammar school, as it was when they started it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just would like to thank you, Jerry, and you, Eddie, for sharing yourselves with us this afternoon, with all the treasures.
Well, you can tell, I think, that both of us love this country, love this part of the world.
Well, I
It
have
shows.
loved like you have. I'm 90, and I've
Now,
had,
folks, who would believe that? I want you to look at this. I told her there was no way. I told her there was no way.
well, God, you need, stop y'all today. Gotta have another meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
On 183, just as you pass Keowee Key and you get to a bridge, we had known John Galliard from Newry. And we knew John for several years. And he had said that there was a waterfall there
High
under the
Falls.
water, is that right?
That's High Falls, yes, ma'am.
And that was under right by the bridge, is that right?
And that was the, like I say, for this area, that was the Burnt Tan Yard, which was up above there, was a very popular swimming place. But for the college kids at Clemson, High Falls was their choice because it was so much closer to Clemson. In fact, I was actually baptized at Burnt Tan Yard. Now, Burnt Tan Yard is still there. The water backs up to the bridge, and if you look on the other side of the bridge coming from Salem, those waterfalls and all that are still there. That's what's called Burnt Tan Yard. That was the baptismal pool for all the churches in this part of the, in the Keowee part of it for years and years and years. And
You can dive High Falls if you can scuba dive.
I'm sorry.
You can dive on High Falls if you can scuba dive. You can see it underwater.
Beautiful.
But we've got all of John's, he wrote stories on it, we've got all of his stories and stuff that he wrote.
Thank you, folks, for being so patient.
Jerry, could I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
There's one thing in Jerry's book. We had a superintendent, well, he was the principal of our high school, and he helped people.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Nally. And
Yeah.
the book is dedicated to them, too. And
It was R.F. Natty, and but what we called back then was poundies. We'd do it for people.
where you bring in food and cakes and all that sort of stuff.
But if you've ever been to the Tribble Center in Seneca,
He's responsible.
he's one of the ones that helped start that.
And I appreciate my classmates and all for being here. We still love each other, and we're going on 50-something years now as far as finishing high school, but we knew one another long before then.
I will graduate from school long before they did.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Are your books here?